So this week we're really getting into the textbook and you're going to be going over chapter 1. So chapter 1 goes really far back to about 20,000 years ago to when the first peoples came to the Americas over the land bridge Beringia. And then it goes kind of quickly through everything to the year 1590. So a couple of things to keep in mind. These are the learning objectives that you have for chapter 1. So after you go through, you do the learning curve, you look at the map, you read everything in chapter 1, you should be able to answer these questions. I don't require you to write an essay over these questions. These are just things that, okay, I read the chapter. Yeah, I can describe the diverse societies that populated the Americas. I can tell you about Mississippian culture. I can tell you about the Hohokam. I can tell you about the Pueblos, the Anasazi. I can tell you about the three major empires that had the first contact with Europeans, the Inca, the Maya, the Aztec. Those are the diverse populations that they're talking about. You explain the reasons for European exploration and expansion. What were they looking for? How did they stumble upon the Americas? Like, what was their motivation? And then when they got to the Americas, what was their motivation to stay and to colonize? Evaluate the reasons for European success in reaching the Americas. Were they all successful? Who were the first to come over? We know the first to have the permanent settlements were the Spanish, but we don't really talk about Spanish after the first chapter. Like, why do you think that is? Were the English more successful and that's why we talk more about them? Or is it because who is writing American history? Is that why we talk more about the English? And we kind of omit the native story. We omit the Spanish story. We omit the Dutch and the French. And then compare the impact of the Columbian Exchange on American Indians. Was it good for America? Was it good for the natives living here? Who benefited from the Columbian Exchange? The goods going back and forth. Did Africans benefit? Not really. Did Europeans benefit? Yeah, in some ways they did. So think about that. And then finally, analyze how the Spanish created an empire in the Americas and describe the impact of Spain's empire building on Indian empires and European nations. Did they kind of set it up for others to want to come and explore and to create their own empires? So the Spanish do play a very important role in conquering the Americas. But don't forget, there's other stories that are in that first chapter. There's stories about Native Americans. Also think about, why do we not know more about Native Americans? What are some reasons why their story is omitted? And I'll go ahead and tell you why. It's because Native American history, it's usually an oral tradition. They don't have to write things down because it's passed generation to generation by storytelling. So there was no need to have it written down. Unlike Europeans who think that everything needs to be written down, right? So those are some reasons why some of that Native story has been left out. We're hearing more of the Native story coming back, especially in our modern era. But you're going to notice there are some voices that have been completely left out, or we just kind of very quickly skip through that history. It's not because we're trying to omit it, it's just because we don't know about it. So as those stories become available to us, we do try to include them. Also, one thing about this textbook, you'll notice the authors. If you go to like the author section, it's written by two white people. So that kind of explains why some things are omitted and some things are included. They do a good job of trying to give you the voice of all the different representation that they can. But these authors are also from the Northeast. They're not from the West. So you're not going to have a lot of Arizona history. And no offense to Native Arizonans, but you haven't been around for very long, like as a state, as a territory, and as being here and being, an ancient civilization. Yes, that has been around. But as far as like when we start talking about U.S. history, we don't really have a lot of the West included just because it took so long for them to reach statehood. So keep that in mind as well. That's why we don't have a lot of the story there. There are some flaws in this textbook, but there's also some really, really great juicy details in this textbook that I hope you get by reading through this first chapter. What you're also going to find that I've included are crash course histories. John Green can do in 15 minutes what would take me 3 or 4 hours to do. So those are just used to reinforce what you're reading in the chapter. Make sure you watch those videos so that you understand more about the context and the content of the chapters that you're reading. And then also work your way through. I've made PowerPoints available to you. That's just a basic summary of the chapter, but feel free to use those, download them if you want to. They're yours to keep. You can use those when it comes to the exam. And so don't forget to use those on your learning curve quizzes too, your chapter quizzes. Then when it comes to the map quiz, your chapter 1 map quiz, use the ebook. Go back and find that map in the text, and so that you can better answer those questions. Because sometimes what's included in the answer, or the answer that they're looking for, might actually be in the caption underneath the map, the description of the map. So make sure you go back and you read that so that you have all the tools that you need in order to be successful on these first assignments that are due during week 2. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to send me a message using the inbox feature in Canvas.